Hello and welcome back to Caffeinated Arcade. So today's video we're going to be diving into Curse of Strahd, and this is the first of a series I'm planning to make. Now this is for DM's eyes only, so if you're a player here, I would skip this video for now. Don't spoil yourself because that's bad. But if you're a DM looking for help with your prep for this module, you're in the right place. I've actually run this module 3 times before, so I'll be an open book during this series, and you'll be able to ask me questions about what I've done in the past, and you'll get to learn from the cool things I've done as well as my mistakes, so that will be great. Well, without further ado, let's dive in. So I'll start by saying that Curse of Strahd is easily one of my favorite 5th edition modules. It's really clearly written, it's easy to follow, and all the bones are there. It's just up to us as the DM to fill in those gaps. And hey, that's any D&D module though. So we'll start with the basics of the story itself. Adventurers from all over will find themselves swept up by mist into the land of Barovia, which is ruled by Strahd von Zarevich, who is also a vampire. So we have a lot of cool things going on here because there are vampires, werewolves, and undead creatures. So you find that the areas surrounding Barovia are really perilous and hard to traverse. So you have these villagers who are stuck within their towns because they hear of how dangerous it is outside, and they're oppressed, they're succumbed to despair, and things are just really, really bad. So when your players get to Barovia, they'll find that it's quite the depressing place. And as they travel from town to town, I should tell you that it is a sandbox style adventure. So there's no specific order per se. It will get decided by the tarot card reading and also your players' decisions and how they interact with Strahd. One thing they added to the beginning of the module that I really like is that when you're telling a dark, sad story, sometimes it's really easy for it to grow tiresome. In order to flesh out the world and make things more interesting, you have to add in some lighter elements, and overall, it just gives everything a lot more dimension. So, it's important to add in humor every once in a while. When someone rolls in that one, have them like trip over a lampshade or catch some drapes on fire. And also, one other way I like to add lighter elements and a bit of hope to a dark story is giving the players likable NPCs. And it's easy to do with Curse of Strahd because you have the Mardikovs who are constantly fighting Strahd's brain. They're a group of were-ravens, so they add a bit of light to the story. You have Irina and Ismark, who you meet right off the bat, who are just trying their best to survive. But these characters add glimmers of hope that are important, because if you don't meet these characters and all you're met with is sad, lonely villagers who don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, your players won't be convinced that Barovia is worth saving. Giving them these dimensions and these NPC characters that they like, they'll want to stick it out and fight to the end of the module. So, at the beginning of chapter 1, we have some insight into Strahd's history and his goals. So, it's important to note that before he became a vampire and ruled over Barovia, he was actually a prince and a conqueror. He fought a lot of bloody battles, and he named the Valley of Barovia after his father, King Barov, and named Castle Ravenloft after his mother, Queen Ravonia. So, there is some history there. Strahd became cold and arrogant, and eventually made a pact with some dark powers in exchange for immortality. Strahd also was in love with a woman named Tatiana, who didn't really return his love. Tatiana was actually in love with Sergei, Strahd's brother. Strahd became jealous and actually killed and drank Sergei's blood, and chasing Tatiana, she jumped to her death, and Strahd was shot with a bunch of arrows, and instead of dying, he actually became a vampire in that moment, and the Dark Powers honored their pact. So that is a brief history on Strahd. And one of the important things we have to decide as the Dungeon Master is how to play Strahd once the party gets to Barovia. Strahd is not stupid. He doesn't stay in his castle until the very end of the story, where the party shows up and battles him to the death. No, he's not like that. He's a dynamic villain, and he should be present throughout the entire story. So he's something you'll have to keep track of at all times when you're DMing, which is interesting and it's a lot of fun. He's charismatic and very intelligent, so if he sees dissent within the party, he'll take advantage of it. If he sees someone who's leaning towards the evil side, he'll try to cater to that and get them to play into what he wants. Strahd isn't the type just to sit in his castle and wait for the party. He should be introduced pretty early on. I actually love introducing him at lower levels because the party's not strong enough to do anything yet, which gives Strahd a chance to do what he does best and manipulate. So it's a lot of fun. Strahd is an active villain in that he's constantly working towards three particular goals, and if your party interferes with those goals, he'll probably end up having a conversation with them sooner rather than later. The first of them is to turn Irina Koliana. Irina is interesting because she's a reincarnation of Tatiana, who is Strahd's former love. So Strahd seeks to court her, marry her, and then turn her into a vampire because, well, that sounds like fun. So Irina and her brother Ismark are extremely worried about this. And this plot point's important because it's the first one that your party will most likely deal with. They'll pretty much meet Irina almost instantly upon going into Barovia. So this is important to note because if they mess with this plan, then Strahd will probably be talking to them sooner rather than later. The second important goal of Strahd is to find Rudolph van Brichten, who is currently incognito in Vallaki. So once your characters travel from Barovia to Vallaki, this is where it will take place, and they'll end up meeting this famous vampire hunter. So Strahd's definitely worried about this, and this is one of his other goals, to find him and probably kill him. So then the third one is interesting when you bring your party into Barovia, because Strahd is seeking a successor, but Strahd is so arrogant that he doesn't allow for anyone to take his place. So he'll be kind of testing people and seeing who would be a proper leader, because Strahd wants to move beyond Barovia and conquer more lands, but he is cursed here, and also no one's good enough to take his place. So this is particularly interesting if you have a party member who's like a really smart wizard, or someone who reminds Strahd of himself, because he'll take interest in them and try to see if they're worthy of taking over the land, and ultimately he'll be like, no, you're not good enough. So these are the three things to keep in mind as you roleplay Strahd. So the next part of Chapter 1 is the Fortunes of Ravenloft, which is where you'll do a card reading to determine the fate of your players, which is fun. So this will happen in the story when your players travel to Barovia and meet Madame Ava. And Madame Ava will do the card reading. It's important because it lets them know about 3 artifacts that can help in the fight against Strahd, one of which is the Sun Sword. You also have the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind and the Tome of Strahd. And the other thing is that it identifies a powerful ally in the fight against Strahd. So this reading's important, and if your players miss it somehow, they can actually do the same reading with Esmeralda later on. But there's 2 different ways you can go about this. So I actually did the chance reading in front of my players the first time. I didn't like it though because it ended up being just some random locations, and some of the locations are not that great. I think my sun sword ended up in a grave in the ground the first time around, and it was really anticlimactic because they just dug it up and it was that. I threw some werewolves into the midst because it felt kind of boring at the time, but yeah, so that was not a great card reading. So what I did the second time I ran the game was I actually rigged the deck. I chose my own locations that seemed the most interesting, and I lined it up that way. And this gave me a lot better results the second time around. So my encouragement is to do whatever you feel the most comfortable with. I think either way can be potentially cool, but my personal recommendation, I would probably rig the deck just because you want the locations to feel meaningful and impactful to the story. So I'll go ahead and tell you what my readings were just because I thought it was a good configuration and also just in case you want to use it. So the first thing, the Tome of Strahd, I actually broke the rules a little bit. I gave it to Van Richten and he kind of used it as a motivator for the party to help out the Wizard of Wine's winery and also as a way for Van Richten to kind of test the party and see if um, they're worth his time and if they can be trusted. So that was the first thing I did, and it worked pretty well. For the Sun Sword, I actually put it in the Amber Temple in the Treasury, and this worked really well because it was one of the last things I did before defeating Strahd. And it was just really nice because it was one of the end of game things that they were working towards. It also gives them a reason to go to the Amber Temple at all. So that was a good motivator there. Then the third artifact, the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind. The last time I DM'd Curse of Strahd, I actually put it in Queen Ravonia's tomb. And this was interesting because one, it worked really well thematically, and also, they didn't end up finding it until their final battle with Strahd, so it added a lot of tension because they were fighting Strahd and also trying to recover this artifact at the same time. So that added an interesting dynamic to the finale of the module. So the fourth reading determines an NPC who can help in the fight against Strahd. If you rig the deck on this one, I would definitely recommend either Esmeralda or Van Richten. They're both strong contenders, and they can also hold their own in a fight. The other NPCs are cool, but I don't think they're as strong as these two. So if you're going to pick one, I would definitely go with one of these. For Strahd's location inside the castle, I don't think this reading matters as much, so if you're going to leave something up to chance, I would say this one. Although there are two locations I would consider just because they're really cool. Having the final battle on the balcony is kind of awesome because of Strahd's spider climb abilities, so that is an option. Also, if you're going inside the castle itself, I would consider maybe the chapel because of his lair actions and being able to move around fairly quickly with ease. So, the end of chapter 1, this is where we have the adventure hooks, which tells you why and how your party ends up in Barovia. And these are important because it's how you start your campaign, and you can really tailor it and customize it to your players. And I would say the options are pretty much limitless. So you have four different introductions. Creeping Fog and Plea for Help are a little bit more basic. Creeping Fog is nice because you can kind of tailor it into anything. It's just the characters are traveling a lonely road through the woods when the fog engulfs them. And then they're in Barovia. Simple enough. Then Plea for Help, it's your typical tavern start. A colorful dressed stranger approaches the characters while they're staying at a tavern and delivers a strange letter, and you later learn that this letter is actually forged. Um, and it's a request to visit the village of Barovia and offer their services. And if the characters follow this character, then they'll get swept up into the mist as well. Um, the one I've run the most would be Mysterious Visitors, which is where the characters ask to get um, they're asked to scare off a band of rowdy travelers. And the travelers actually turn out to be Vistani, who also serve Strahd to some extent. But the elder of the Vistani tells a story by the fireside, and the characters end up in this weird trance where they're eventually lured into these caravans and end up on the foggy road on the way to Barovia. So there are several different directions that you can go. And one thing I would actually recommend is maybe using one, two, three, or all of them, depending on your party size. That way you can split up the characters and almost give them their own introductions. That way you can see them in their home environment before they're stripped away to a distant land, and then we're not as certain of what their backgrounds are. So we get to see them in their home environment first, and then that way the stakes are higher when they end up in Barovia and they don't know where they're at, and they're more likely to want to find a solution to the problem. Well, that's chapter 1 of Curse of Strahd. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like, a comment, or feel free to subscribe. And let me know in the comments how you plan on luring your players into the land of Barovia. Wahahaha! Catch you later!